A woman who can't give life has no place in mine. The words didn't echo because no one dared repeat them, but they hung in the hospital room like something heavier than air, something that pressed down on every breath Clara Whitmore tried to take. I'm sorry. This isn't what I signed up for. I deserve a real family. He said it calmly, almost politely, like he was cancelling a reservation instead of ending a life they had once promised to build together. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, cold and indifferent, washing the room in a sterile glow that made everything feel smaller, quieter, more final. Clara didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded once, like her body understood something her heart hadn't caught up to yet. And then he walked out. No door slam. No last glance. Just footsteps fading down a polished hallway until even that sound disappeared. 2 nurses passed by the doorway, slowing just enough to look, then moving on. No one stepped in. No one said her name. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of judgment, full of everything people didn't say out loud but still believed. She sat there, hands folded in her lap, feeling something inside her collapse without making a sound. Not broken in a way you could see. Broken in a way that didn't bleed. Minutes passed. Or maybe it was longer. Time didn't feel real anymore. When Clara finally stood, her heels clicked once against the tile, sharp and out of place, like a reminder she was still here. She walked out of the room alone, past the waiting chairs, past the vending machines humming in the corner, past couples holding hands and whispering about futures she would never have. No one stopped her. No one noticed. Outside, the late afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the parking lot, warm and golden, completely unaware that something inside her world had gone cold. Clara paused at the edge of the curb, her fingers tightening around the thin strap of her bag. For a moment, she looked like she might turn back, like she might run after something that was already gone. But she didn't. She stepped forward instead, into a life that no longer had a shape. And somewhere across that same quiet street, a man stood beside an old pickup truck, holding a small paper bag in one hand and a little girl's backpack in the other. "Daddy, are we late?" "Not yet." "You always say that." "Because we always make it." The girl laughed softly, tugging at his sleeve, her voice light against the stillness of the afternoon. He glanced up, just briefly, his eyes scanning the sidewalk without expectation, without urgency. And for the first time since the words were spoken, since the silence settled, someone saw her. Not her past. Not her diagnosis. Just her. Clara didn't notice him yet. But something had already shifted, quiet and unseen, like the first breath before a storm changes direction. The evening air carried a faint chill as Clara stepped onto the sidewalk, each footfall measured, controlled, as if the ground beneath her might give way if she moved too quickly. Keep walking. Do not stop. Do not turn around. The words were not spoken out loud, but they repeated in her mind with a steady rhythm, quieter than panic, stronger than doubt. The sun was beginning to dip behind the buildings, casting long shadows that stretched across the street like something reaching for her, but she kept moving, eyes forward, shoulders squared, dignity clinging to her like the last piece of something she refused to lose. Behind her, the glass doors of the hospital slid open and closed with a soft mechanical sigh, indifferent to who came or went. In front of her, the world continued as if nothing had changed. Cars rolled by. A distant siren hummed somewhere blocks away. A couple laughed as they crossed the street, their voices light, unaware. Clara slowed near the curb, her breath catching just slightly, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her to feel it, the quiet crack beneath the surface. Across the street, the man by the truck shifted his weight, adjusting the strap of the small girl's backpack over his shoulder. "Stay close, Emma." "I am close." "Closer than that." The little girl moved beside him, her small hand brushing against his sleeve, and he gave a faint nod, not looking down, just knowing she was there. Clara stepped forward, the crosswalk. Signal blinking white, counting down in silent urgency. Halfway across, the sound of a car turning too quickly made her pause, just for a second, her body instinctively stilling before continuing on. It was a small moment, almost nothing, but it was enough for the man to notice. He watched the way she moved, not lost, not confused, just carrying something invisible and heavy. "Daddy." "Yeah? Why does she look like that?" He did not answer right away. His gaze stayed on Clara, thoughtful, measured, like he was seeing more than what was in front of him. Like what? Like she forgot something important. The man exhaled slowly, a breath that carried weight but not judgment. Sometimes people do not forget. Then what? Sometimes they lose something they cannot get back. The girl was quiet for a moment, processing in the simple, honest way children do. That sounds sad. It can be. Clara reached the other side of the street, her steps slowing as she approached the narrow sidewalk lined with small storefronts and dimly lit windows. A breeze passed through, lifting a strand of her hair before letting it fall again, soft and unnoticed. She stopped near a bench, her hand tightening around the strap of her bag, her shoulders rising just slightly with a breath she did not finish. For a moment, she looked like she might sit down. For a moment, she looked like she might let herself feel it. But she did not. She stayed standing, eyes fixed somewhere ahead, somewhere distant, somewhere safer than the truth. The man watched her for 1 second longer than necessary. Then he picked up the small paper bag from the hood of his truck and stepped forward, his daughter following without question. He did not rush. He did not call out. He simply closed the distance with quiet, steady steps until he was close enough for his voice to reach her without breaking the silence. Clara did not turn immediately. "Are you okay?" The question was simple, ordinary, almost easy to ignore. But something in the way he said it made it different, not curious, not intrusive, just present. Clara turned slowly, her eyes meeting his for the first time, and for a brief second, the world around them seemed to soften, like everything else had stepped back to give that moment space. She opened her mouth as if to answer, then paused, the words catching somewhere between truth and habit. "I am fine." He nodded once, not challenging her, not correcting her, just accepting the answer she chose to give. "All right." He glanced at the bench, then back at her. "If you change your mind, there is a seat right there. No pressure. No expectation. Just an option." Clara looked at the bench, then back at him, something unreadable flickering behind her eyes before she gave a small, almost invisible nod. The little girl beside him stepped forward slightly, her gaze curious but gentle. "Hi." Clara blinked, caught off guard by the softness in the child's voice. "Hello. You can sit if you want. It is not a sad bench." The man let out a quiet breath, something close to a smile, but he did not interrupt. Clara looked at the bench again, then at the child, and for the first time since she walked out of that hospital, something inside her shifted, small, fragile, but real enough to feel. Clara hesitated for 1 more second, then lowered herself onto the bench, her movement slow and deliberate, as if sitting required permission she was not sure she had. "Thank you. It is okay. It really is okay." The little girl nodded with a seriousness that felt older than her years, then climbed onto the bench beside her, leaving a careful space between them, not too close, not too far. The man remained standing for a moment, watching quietly, then set the paper bag down on the bench and took a seat on the other side, his posture relaxed but attentive, like someone who had learned to be present without intruding. The street around them continued its gentle rhythm, tires rolling over pavement, a door chime ringing from a nearby shop, the faint hum of evening settling in. Clara kept her eyes forward, her hands folded in her lap again, fingers lightly pressed together as if holding something fragile that could not be seen. "You do not have to talk. I know. But you can if you want." His voice was calm, steady, not offering solutions, not asking for explanations, just leaving space. Clara exhaled slowly, a breath that carried more weight than sound, and for a moment it seemed like she might speak, like the words were right there, waiting. But they did not come. Instead, she asked something else, something safer. "Is she your daughter?" The man glanced at the little girl, then back at Clara, a softness crossing his expression. Yes. She is very kind. She learned from better people than me. The girl tilted her head, frowning slightly. No, I did not. Yes, you did. No, I did not. The man allowed a faint smile, not correcting her further, just letting the moment settle the way it needed to. Clara watched them, something shifting quietly behind her eyes, something that did not hurt as sharply as before, something that almost felt warm. What is your name? The girl asked suddenly. Clara blinked, caught off guard again, the question simple but direct. Clara. I am Emma. That is a beautiful name. Thank you. My dad picked it. Clara looked at him then, really looked this time, noticing the details she had missed before, the worn edges of his jacket, the steady calm in his posture, the way his attention never wavered from the people around him. And you are? She asked. Daniel. Daniel Hayes. Clara Whitmore. The name settled between them, no weight attached, no expectations following, just two people acknowledging each other in the simplest way possible. A breeze moved through the street again, softer now, carrying the faint scent of coffee from a nearby shop. Daniel reached for the paper bag and opened it, pulling out 2 small containers and a folded napkin. We were on our way to dinner. It is nothing fancy. But it is warm. He held one of the containers out toward her, not pushing it into her hands, just offering it, steady and quiet. Clara looked at it, then at him, hesitation flickering across her face. I cannot. You can. It is just food. No strings. She almost smiled at that, just a hint, just enough to be real. No strings? None. Emma leaned forward, her voice soft but certain. It is not charity. It is sharing. Clara looked at the child, then back at the container in Daniel's hand, and something inside her, something that had been locked tight since the hospital, loosened just a little. She reached out slowly, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment as she took it, a contact so small it could have been missed, but it was not. Thank you. You are welcome. The words were simple, ordinary, but they landed differently, like they meant something more than they should. Clara opened the container, the warmth rising gently into the cool evening air, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to take something without asking what it would cost. And Daniel watched, not with expectation, not with judgment, just with the quiet understanding that sometimes the first step back to life is not a grand moment, but a small, almost invisible decision to accept kindness without fear. Clara held the container carefully, as if it carried more than just food, as if accepting it had shifted something she could not yet name. You should eat while it is still warm. I will. You do not have to rush. Daniel's voice stayed even, giving her time instead of instructions, and she nodded slightly before taking a small bite, slow, measured, like she was relearning something simple. Emma watched her with quiet curiosity, her legs swinging lightly above the pavement. It is good, right? Yes. My dad always makes sure it is. Daniel glanced at his daughter with a soft exhale. I do my best. He always says that. Because it is true. Clara looked between them, something fragile and unfamiliar rising beneath the surface, not quite comfort, not quite relief, but close enough to feel different from the emptiness she had carried all day. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting a warm glow over the sidewalk, softening the edges of everything around them. For a moment, the world felt quieter, slower, like it had made room for this small exchange. Do you live around here? Clara asked, her voice steadier now, though still careful. About 10 minutes down the road. Small place. But it is enough. He said it without hesitation, without apology, and that alone made the words feel solid. Clara nodded, her gaze drifting to the passing cars, their headlights streaking briefly across the pavement before disappearing into the distance. Enough is not something people say often. Most people are too busy chasing more. And you are not. Daniel shrugged lightly, not dismissive, just certain. I used to think more would fix things. It does not. Clara looked at him, something in her expression shifting again, curiosity threading through the quiet. What changed? He paused, just for a second, his eyes moving briefly to Emma before returning to Clara. I did. The answer was simple, almost understated, but it carried a weight that did not need explanation. Clara absorbed it in silence, her fingers tightening slightly around the container before relaxing again. That sounds harder than chasing more. It is. But it lasts longer. Emma leaned forward, resting her chin in her hands. He says that about pancakes too. Clara blinked, surprised, then let out the faintest breath that almost became a laugh. Daniel shook his head gently. I do not remember saying that. You did. Well then, it must be true. The three of them sat there for a moment, the quiet no longer heavy, no longer filled with absence, but something softer, something shared. A car pulled into a nearby parking space, its engine ticking as it cooled, and somewhere in the distance, a door closed with a soft thud. Clara finished another bite, slower this time, more present, her shoulders no longer as rigid as before. Why did you stop? She asked suddenly, her voice low but clear. Most people would have just walked past. Daniel did not answer immediately. He leaned back slightly, his gaze steady but not intense, as if considering the question rather than reacting to it. Because I have been the person no one stopped for. And I remember what that felt like. Clara held his gaze for a moment, something unspoken passing between them, something that did not need to be explained. Emma shifted closer to her, not touching, just near enough to feel like company. You are not invisible, the girl said softly, her voice certain in a way only children can be. Clara swallowed, her eyes flickering for just a second before she looked away, but this time, it was not to hide. It was to steady herself. Daniel watched quietly, not stepping in, not filling the silence, just allowing it to exist without pressure. And in that stillness, something began to settle inside Clara, not fully healed, not even close, but no longer unraveling. Just holding. The warmth of the food lingered longer than expected, not just on Clara's hands, but somewhere deeper, somewhere she had not allowed anything to reach in a long time. It has been a while since I sat like this. Like what? Without needing to explain myself. Daniel nodded once, not surprised, not pushing further, just acknowledging the truth in her words. Emma leaned back slightly, her small sneakers brushing softly against the edge of the bench. You do not have to explain things to people who are nice. That is not always how the world works. Maybe it should be. Clara looked at her, something almost like a smile touching the corners of her lips before fading into something quieter, something more thoughtful. The street had grown calmer now, the rush of earlier traffic easing into a steady, distant hum, and the glow from the streetlights wrapped around them like a gentle shield from everything else. A group of people passed by on the opposite sidewalk, their voices low but audible, drifting just enough to reach where Clara sat. Is that her? I think so. That is the woman from the clinic, right? Clara's fingers stilled around the container, the movement so small it might have gone unnoticed by anyone who was not paying attention. Daniel noticed. He did not turn. He did not react outwardly. But something in his posture shifted, subtle and grounded, like a quiet anchor. People talk. They always do. Clara kept her eyes forward, her voice steady but thinner now, like something carefully held together. They think they know the whole story. They usually only know the part that makes them feel comfortable. Emma frowned slightly, looking from one adult to the other. Why would they talk about you? Clara hesitated, just long enough for the silence to carry weight. Because I am someone they understand easily. What does that mean? Clara inhaled. Slowly, her gaze dropping for the first time since she sat down. It means they think they know what I am worth. The word settled between them, quiet but heavy, and for a moment, even the distant sounds of the street seemed to pull back. And what do they think? Emma asked, her voice softer now, more careful. Clara did not answer right away. She could have said it plainly. She could have repeated the words she had already heard, the ones that followed her out of the hospital room. But instead, she shook her head slightly. It does not matter. Daniel turned his head just enough to look at her, his expression calm but firm in a way that did not demand attention, only truth. It mattered enough for you to carry it here. Clara met his gaze again, and this time, she did not look away. There was no accusation in his voice, no pressure, just a simple observation that landed deeper than anything louder could have. She exhaled, the breath uneven but real. They think I failed at something that was supposed to define me. Emma blinked, confused. That does not make sense. It does to them. But not to you. Clara hesitated, and for a moment, the answer hung between what she believed and what she had been told to believe. I am still figuring that out. Daniel nodded slowly, as if that was enough, as if uncertainty was allowed to exist without being rushed into clarity. The group across the street moved on, their voices fading into the distance, leaving behind a quiet that felt different now, less like isolation and more like space. Emma shifted closer again, her small presence steady and unafraid. I think you are worth a lot. Clara looked at her, the simplicity of the statement breaking through something she had not been able to reach on her own. Why? Because you said thank you. The answer was immediate, certain, untouched by anything complicated. Daniel let out a quiet breath beside them, not correcting, not adding, just letting the moment stand exactly as it was. Clara lowered her gaze briefly, her grip loosening around the container as something inside her softened, not fixed, not healed, but no longer held as tightly by the weight of what others believed. And for the first time since the whispers reached her ears, she did not feel smaller. She just felt seen. The night settled deeper around them, the kind of quiet that did not feel empty but full of things unspoken, things waiting for the right moment to surface. Clara set the container down beside her, her hands now resting loosely in her lap, no longer gripping, no longer bracing. I used to think if I just did everything right, things would work out. Most people think that. I followed every rule. So did I. The exchange was calm, almost reflective, their voices blending into the soft hum of the streetlights above. Clara turned slightly toward Daniel, her expression more open now, less guarded, but still careful. And it still was not enough. Daniel nodded once, his gaze steady. Sometimes life is not measuring what you give. Sometimes it is measuring what you survive. The words lingered, not heavy, but grounded, like something that had been learned slowly over time. Emma shifted again, pulling her knees up onto the bench, her small voice breaking the quiet with gentle certainty. My dad says surviving is not the same as living. Daniel glanced at her, a faint smile touching his face. I do say that. Then what is living? Clara asked, her tone softer now, almost curious. Daniel leaned back slightly, his eyes drifting toward the dim glow of the street before returning to her. Living is when you stop asking what you lost. And start protecting what is still here. Clara absorbed that, her gaze lowering for just a moment as if she was weighing the truth of it against everything she had just been through. That sounds simple. It is not. But it is honest. Emma leaned closer again, her presence steady, her voice quiet but firm. You can protect us for a little while. Clara blinked, surprised, her eyes lifting to meet the child's. What do you mean? Until you feel better. The offer was so natural, so unguarded, that it took a second for it to fully land. Clara looked at Daniel, a question forming without words, and he met her gaze with the same calm steadiness he had held from the beginning. We are just having dinner. Nothing more complicated than that. There was no pressure in his tone, no expectation hidden beneath the invitation, just a simple extension of the moment they were already sharing. Clara hesitated, not out of fear this time, but out of unfamiliarity, as if kindness without conditions was something she did not quite know how to accept yet. I do not want to impose. You are not. I am sure you have your routine. This is it. He said it plainly, without hesitation, and something about that made it easier to believe. A car passed slowly, its headlights brushing across their faces before fading into the distance, and in that brief light, Clara's expression softened in a way that had not been there before. She looked down at her hands, then back at Emma, who was watching her with quiet patience, not pushing, not expecting, just waiting. "Just for a little while?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded once. "Just for a little while." Emma smiled, small but genuine, as if something important had just been decided. Clara let out a slow breath, one that did not tremble this time, one that felt almost steady. She reached for the container again, not because she needed to eat, but because it gave her something to hold as she stepped into something new, something uncertain, something quietly hopeful. And as the three of them sat there under the soft glow of the streetlights, the world did not change in any dramatic way. No one stopped to notice. No one marked the moment. But something had begun, something small and quiet and real, the kind of beginning that does not announce itself, but slowly, patiently, changes everything. They did not move right away, not because they could not, but because something about that quiet bench had become more than just a place to sit, it had become a place where nothing needed to be proven. "We should probably head out." "Okay. But we do not have to rush." Daniel stood first, slow and unhurried, picking up the empty container and folding the napkin with practiced ease, the kind of small order that came from a life built on steady routines. Emma slid off the bench and reached for his hand, then paused, glancing back at Clara, as if waiting for her to follow. Clara remained seated for 1 second longer, her gaze lingering on the ground beneath her feet, then she rose, smoothing the front of her coat in a quiet gesture that felt like reclaiming something small but important. "Thank you for not rushing me. There is no clock on something like this." He said it simply, without weight, and that made it easier to accept. They began walking together, not too close, not too far, their steps falling into a rhythm that did not need to be coordinated, just shared. The sidewalk stretched ahead under the glow of evenly spaced streetlights, each one casting a soft circle of light that they stepped through one by one, like moving through moments instead of distance. "Do you always do this?" Clara asked after a few steps, her voice quiet but more grounded than before. "Do what?" "Stop for people." Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, only when it feels right." And this felt right. He glanced at her briefly, then back ahead. "You did not look like someone who needed fixing. You looked like someone who needed space to be seen." Clara let that settle, her breath slowing as she walked, her shoulders no longer drawn as tight as before. Emma swung their joined hands lightly, her voice drifting into the space between them. "I knew you would come." Clara looked down at her, surprised again. "You did?" "Yes." "How?" Emma shrugged, the movement small but certain. "Because you did not leave when you could have." The answer was simple, but it landed deeper than anything complicated could have. Clara glanced forward, her eyes catching the reflection of their three figures in a darkened shop window, walking side by side, not matching, not symmetrical, but together in a way that felt unexpectedly natural. "I almost did. But you did not." Daniel's voice was steady, not correcting her, just anchoring the truth she had already lived. They reached the truck, an older model with worn edges but clean lines, the kind of vehicle that had been taken care of over time rather than replaced. Daniel opened the passenger door and stepped back slightly. "You can sit up front." Clara hesitated, her eyes moving from the open door to him, then to Emma, who was already climbing into the back seat with practiced ease. "Are you sure?" "Yes. It is easier that way." There was no formality in the gesture, no sense of obligation, just a quiet inclusion that did not ask for anything in return. Clara placed her hand on the edge of the door, the metal cool beneath her fingers, and for a moment, she paused again, not out of fear, but out of awareness, like she understood this step mattered more than it seemed. Then she got in. The seat was warm from the day's heat, the interior simple but clean, carrying the faint scent of fabric and something familiar, something lived in. Daniel closed the door gently and walked around to the driver's side, his movements unhurried, steady, as if there was no need to rush into whatever came next. He started the engine, the low hum filling the space, grounding it in something real and present. For a moment, no one spoke. The dashboard lights cast a soft glow across their faces, illuminating the quiet between them, not empty, not awkward, just waiting. Clara looked ahead through the windshield, the road stretching out in front of them, not long, not dramatic, just a simple path forward. And for the first time that day, she did not feel like she was walking alone into it. The truck pulled away from the curb with a soft hum, tires rolling over the quiet street as the last of the evening settled into night. No one spoke at first. Seatbelt. Got it. All good. The small exchanges came naturally, light and practical, filling just enough space without breaking the calm that had formed between them. The dashboard lights cast a gentle glow, illuminating Daniel's steady hands on the wheel, Emma's reflection in the back window, and Clara's profile as she looked out at the passing streets, her expression thoughtful, no longer guarded in the same way. Outside, the city moved in quiet layers, porch lights flickering on, silhouettes shifting behind curtains, the world continuing without pause, unaware that something had shifted inside that truck. Clara rested her hands lightly in her lap, her fingers no longer tense, just present, as if she had finally stopped. Bracing for something that was not coming. You can ask. Ask what? Anything you are wondering. Daniel's voice was calm, not inviting interrogation, just offering openness without expectation. Clara hesitated, her gaze still forward, watching the road unfold under the headlights. How long has it been just the two of you? 6 years. That is a long time. It is enough time to learn what matters. Emma leaned forward slightly from the back seat, her voice soft but certain. He learned how to make pancakes that do not burn. I still burn them sometimes. Only when you think too much. Daniel let out a quiet breath, something close to a laugh, but softer. Clara turned slightly toward them, a faint warmth touching her expression again, something that felt unfamiliar but welcome. And what matters? She asked. Daniel did not answer right away. The truck slowed at a red light, the glow washing over them in a muted red hue, pausing everything for just a moment. Showing up. Even when it is not easy. Especially then. The light changed. The truck moved forward again. Clara absorbed the words, her gaze lowering briefly, her thoughts turning inward in a way that was no longer heavy, just reflective. I thought showing up was enough. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes people only see what they expect. Daniel nodded once, his eyes still on the road. That is why you do not live for what they see. Emma shifted again, her small voice breaking through with quiet clarity. You live for who stays. Clara blinked, caught by the simplicity of it, the truth that did not need explanation. She looked at Daniel, then at Emma, then back out the windshield, where the road stretched ahead in steady lines of light and shadow. Do people stay? She asked softly, almost to herself. Daniel's grip on the wheel remained steady, his voice even. The right ones do. The truck turned onto a quieter street, the houses spaced a little farther apart, the air feeling stiller, more settled. Clara noticed the change without needing to ask, her posture easing just slightly as the environment shifted around them. A porch light flickered on as they passed, casting a brief glow across the windshield, then fading into the dark again. We are almost there. It is nothing fancy. But it is ours. There was no pride in the statement, no apology either, just truth, grounded and steady. Clara nodded, her breath slow and even now, her gaze no longer searching for something to hold on to, because she had already found it, not in answers, not in explanations, but in something quieter, something steadier. The truck rolled to a gentle stop in front of a small house with a warm light glowing from the front window, the kind of light that did not demand attention, but welcomed it. Daniel turned off the engine. The hum faded. The silence returned. But this time, it was not empty. This time, it felt like something waiting to be lived in. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, a quiet rhythm that filled the space just enough to remind them they had arrived somewhere real. This is it. It is nice. It is home. Daniel opened his door first, stepping out into the cool night air before walking around to Clara's side, not to hurry her, not to assist without need, just to be there when she chose to step out. Emma had already slipped from the back seat, her small shoes tapping lightly against the driveway as she moved toward the front door, stopping just before opening it, as if waiting for something to be complete before going inside. Clara remained seated for 1 second longer, her eyes taking in the soft light glowing from the window, the quiet stillness of the neighborhood, the absence of noise that demanded anything from her. Then she reached for the handle and stepped out. The air felt different here, calmer, less crowded, like the world had slowed down enough for her to catch up to it. You do not have to stay long. Just as long as you need. Or as short as you want. Daniel's words were steady, giving her control over something, even if it was small. Clara nodded, her gaze moving from him to Emma, who stood patiently by the door, her hand resting lightly on the handle. Ready? Yes. Okay. Emma opened the door, and a soft wave of warmth greeted them, the kind that came from a space lived in, not decorated, not perfected, just cared for. They stepped inside together, the wooden floor creaking faintly under their weight, the light from a single lamp casting a gentle glow across the room. A small couch, a low table, a few scattered books, nothing excessive, nothing missing. Just enough. Clara paused just inside the doorway, her hand still resting lightly against the frame as if crossing that threshold meant something more than stepping into a house. It is simple. But it is real. Daniel said it without emphasis, just truth, and Clara let out a slow breath, one that felt deeper than the ones before. Emma moved toward the kitchen, already reaching for a glass. Do you want water? Yes, thank you. Clara's voice was softer now, not because it was weak, but because it no longer needed to protect itself the same way. She stepped further inside, her eyes taking in the small details, a child's drawing pinned to the wall, a jacket draped over a chair, a life in motion, imperfect and steady. Daniel set the empty container on the counter, his movements quiet, practiced, as if everything in this space had its place, not because it had to, but because it had been built that way over time. You can sit anywhere. There is no wrong spot. Clara gave a faint nod and moved toward the couch, lowering herself slowly, her posture easing as she settled into the cushions. Emma returned with a glass of water, placing it carefully in Clara's hands with a small, satisfied nod. There you go. Thank you, Emma. You are welcome. The exchange was simple, but it carried something deeper, something unspoken but understood. Clara held the glass for a moment before taking a sip, the coolness grounding her, bringing her fully into the present in a way she had not felt all day. Daniel leaned lightly against the counter, his arms relaxed, his gaze steady but not intrusive. No one rushed the silence. No one tried to fill it. And in that quiet, something shifted again, not dramatically, not loudly, but undeniably. Clara looked up, her eyes moving between them, the man who had not tried to fix her, and the child who had not questioned her worth. I thought my life ended today. It did not. It just changed shape. Daniel's voice was calm, certain, and Clara held his gaze for a moment longer than before, something steady forming where uncertainty had been. Emma climbed onto the couch beside her, close enough to feel like presence, not pressure. You can stay until you feel like you again. Clara blinked, her grip tightening slightly around the glass before loosening again, her shoulders dropping in a way that felt like release, not defeat. She looked around the room one more time, the quiet, the warmth, the absence of judgment, and for the first time since everything had fallen apart, she did not feel like something was missing. She felt like something had been given back. And in that small, quiet house, under a single lamp and the soft hum of a life that did not demand perfection, Clara Whitmore sat still, not as someone who had been left behind, but as someone who had just been seen clearly for the first time, and no one said anything after that, because nothing needed to be said, and the silence that followed was not empty, it was full.